So, good morning once again, Mr. Jagdeo. So, could we talk a bit about what's happening in Guyana in relation to crime, especially with regards to what the president recently said about gun issuance to civilians and about this potential domestic threat and his deploying of the military to deal with it?
Yeah. Before I speak about what's happening today and share my views on the government's approach to fighting crime today, I think we need to go back to about a year and a half when this government was in opposition and they campaigned for the elections, the 2015 elections. They indicated at that time that they had a security plan that would have seen crime being reduced drastically in the country. People believe them, many people believe them because they looked at the people who were saying these things, and many of them have been in the security sector for a long while. You had two former chiefs of staff, you had a former commissioner of police, the president himself comes out of the army. So people believe them, it sounded credible. I must say that the government has not lived up to the expectation of our people. They have failed miserably, and they have failed in such a spectacular, unbelievable way. It often defies logic and common sense. So after the elections, where APNU took office, we thought that this plan that they had spoken of would be rolled out immediately. And then to our surprise, the minister said, and then the president said, we're now working on a security plan. That shocked us. And then we were fed with a series of ludicrous policies that we're told would reduce crime in Guyana. It started off with the minister saying we should shut down these business premises at 2 a.m. in the morning, and this will have a huge impact on crime. Everyone in Guyana, including the opposition, thought he was out of his mind because many of those places and the people who go to those places were not the ones who were conducting or perpetrating criminal acts. They then, that failed miserably. He then launched this amnesty for illegal guns, and that too failed. The guns that were handed in were by maybe law-abiding citizens who didn't want to run afoul of the law. So farmers who may have acquired an illegal weapon, I spoke to a number of Amerindians in the hinterland who were encouraged to give up their weapons with the promise that they'll get it back legally, they'll get a permit. Those people never got back their weapons. The weapons that came in didn't come from the criminals. So that failed too. Then we were told that they would get more dogs and horses. And I have not seen any evidence of that working too, and that failed. So what we have seen is a series of ludicrous excuses from this government, starting from the first day it assumed office. And these excuses have continued until now. Of recent, we've heard the minister saying, why do you expect us to, or how do you expect us to fight these criminals and you're not paying taxes? Now, he doesn't speak about the large amount of taxes that the government collects, which is squandered now. And I can come back to that point. Then recently, after a series of robberies and a gun owner shot two criminals, the president then came out and said there are too many legal weapons out there, we need to start withdrawing legal weapons. So another almost excuse for crime. It's not the legal gun holders who are perpetrating crime, and there is absolutely no evidence that they're renting out their guns to criminals. Absolutely no evidence. But again, we heard that as a new excuse. And then, yesterday we saw this press release that said that it's a national domestic threat. I don't understand what that means. A national domestic threat. They're still to define that. And that the criminal, that it may be politically motivated, or the president then said, people are committing these crimes to embarrass the government and the police. Now, any right-thinking person in Guyana would understand that this is pure drivel. It's pure nonsense. It's just a series of excuses that the government is making for its ineptitude, its inability, its lack of capability to handle the crime situation. The president should look to a number of things. First of all, he should be transparent and release the list of people that he pardoned, which we've been trying to get, because I heard many of them have been the ones committing a lot of these criminal acts too. But they treat this list of people who were pardoned as a state secret. We've been unable to get it. We requested it from the government. We went to the parliament. The speaker would not allow us to debate a motion asking for the list of names. So he should do that. He should look at this excuse that Ramjatan is making about not having enough money, basically. We spend about $11 million a month on the Prime Minister. That would work out to about $675 million in the 5 years that the next he will be Prime Minister. When ministers go abroad, the President, the Prime Minister, they carry these huge entourages. We would travel with 1 or 2 persons. They travel with 10, 15 people. They waste tons and tons of money there. The community policing groups, they took back their vehicles from the community policing groups. So it's all a series of excuses, a series of excuses. We heard the president, again, he came to the parliament and he said, the reason, one of the reasons for the increase, and I don't know whether in the government's eyes, crime is on the increase, because one day you hear them say, the commissioner of police and the others say, based on statistics, the crime is falling. The next week you hear the Prime Minister's office saying crime is on the increase because people who are in drug trade are now conducting other criminal acts. Then the office of the president denied the increase in crime, but yesterday they said we're launching this new security measure to tackle the increased rate of crime. So they're even inconsistent internally with what they say, whether crime is on the increase or decrease. But the country knows that crime is on the increase. And so he spoke about the British security sector reform project, as though this is going to solve all of our problems sometime down the line. What he did not say, that the PPP left them with the largest program that they are now implementing, the Citizen Security Program funded by the Inter-American Development Bank, the second one. We had completed Citizen Security Part 1, and this is the second loan that we had negotiated, $3.2 billion. We've been working over the years to address a series of things: enhanced surveillance, video surveillance, enhanced intelligence, improving the forensic and investigative capabilities of the police through new labs, improving the physical facilities, building new police stations, all part of that project. The succession planning in the police force, almost 50 new officers who were trained through the Army Cadet program to go into middle level in the police force. A whole range, enhancing community policing. All of these are measures that we had introduced. I saw yesterday the president repeated them again as though they are new. That is what they're going to be doing. But these are all things that are part of the programs of the past. And so today, what I feel is that they're clueless. The president is leaving the country, prime minister is leaving the country shortly. The crime situation is unbelievable. People are being ravaged all across the country. And they have absolutely, it seems as though the government is more sympathetic to criminals than to people who are legal, the licensed firearm holders, etc. I spoke to a few policemen, and they said to me, we don't want to get into trouble with the government because they've sent a clear signal that we must not shoot, but we are not going to put our lives on the line. They said to me, sometimes when we catch these criminals, the criminals say to them, Granger in power now. That's what the criminals say to the policemen, almost threatening them that they have some contact or something else within the government, so that they're afraid. Many of them are afraid to take tough action. And if you're not unambiguous, if you send mixed signals to the police force, then they are going to feel insecure about tackling the crime the way they should. We called for deployment of the army earlier. We called for deployment of the specially trained groups, tactically, the TSU, to send them across the country. Granger didn't want the army to come out earlier. Now he's bringing out the army as an act of desperation. And so I find this latest act, them saying national security threat, is just an excuse.
You think it's a cover-up?
It is a cover-up. It's an excuse, and it is designed to send a signal to their supporters, just like how they said in the past, you know, oh, the economy is sliding, not because of the failed economic policies of this government, which has seen every sector collapsing: sugar, rice, manufacturing, mining, small mining, the logging industry, construction activities, all collapsing. But you know what? The reason why it's slowing down is because the drug money is not circulating. So give us, you know, some more time until the oil money comes in. It's an excuse, hoping to dupe their supporters. But those people are not stupid. The supporters are not stupid, because many of them see the slowdown in the economy and that it's not coming from drug money. So similarly here too, if you say to people, it's a domestic threat, security threat, and people are conducting crime to embarrass the government and police, they're hoping that some of their supporters will buy that excuse and say, oh, and repeat it. It's a PPP or some other group trying to embarrass the government. But those people are not stupid too. They live in this society. They're APNU supporters. They know that it's just an excuse that they're making. And so it's not going to work to try to cast the blame elsewhere, because this is what this government is all about. It has no proactive policies. Everything is what the PPP did and what they shouldn't do, but nothing on its own.
So you spoke about the government's ineptitude. Then you mentioned that some of the programs that they are looking at were programs from the past. So that's a bit contradictory, because if they're doing some of the programs from the past, then how does that reflect their incompetence to handle?
Well, because it's a whole package. So you do a lot of the things he mentioned now that they are going to do are things that we have done that are part of this program. They have $3.2 billion now to address. But it can't be just addressing these things. It's the atmosphere. That's why I spoke about the signal to the police force. If every time the Minister of National Security opens his mouth, it's to make excuses or to undermine the police force. And when the President speaks, he is in another world, as though nothing is happening. The problems we are faced now with criminals came from this period of troubles that he called the period of troubles, out of touch with reality. Then the people who have to go out and fight the criminals, they're simply not going to be enthusiastic about it. And so they need to be unambiguous. The first thing is unambiguous, that we are on the side of law enforcement. That if you are a criminal and you conduct criminal acts, then the police will be authorized to use whatever force necessary if they feel threatened. You have people with guns. The police I remember in London when they accidentally shot a person on the subway. The mayor of London said, police in the UK are authorized to use deadly force if they feel threatened. And this guy did not have a real gun. Here you have people with real guns, and the policemen are told that maybe you shouldn't use deadly force. Who do you think would want to go and shoot at a criminal in that case? So unambiguous signal to the police force that we are on their side, that we will stand behind them when they go after criminals, not question them and put them on trial, etc. That's one. Two, a consistent set of policies, not the silly excuses that we're getting. Three, no fetish for any foreign project like the president has for this British project. Implementing the citizen security in a manner that involves people. Get the community policing groups back, They had a process of dismantling them. Resume the work of the community policing group. Deploy the tactical service unit across the country. Have the army. We can't have an army like ours waiting to fight war that we will never fight, because we're not going to be fighting our neighbors. So we have their valuable resource in the fight against crime. Use the army. It seemed to be, after the president saying he's not going to use the army at all, now he seems to have changed his mind on that. But these are the things that they have to do. So they are using some of our projects, but it's how you conduct it and the atmosphere you set to fight crime. And then releasing people without even the lack of transparency, these criminals that they've released. I heard that many of those are hardcore criminals. That's the reason they do not want to give us the list, because many of them were clients of some of the lawyers and other people, APNU supporters, who were in prison but for hardcore crime, and they were released. And so if we get the list, we will then say, hold on a minute, you said you were only releasing petty criminals, but why did you release these people? And so that's why they don't want to do it.
The president also recently boasted of the police force solving crimes faster than under the PPP, but there was a contention that it is not about crime solving but crime prevention. Could you expand more on this?
It's about solving crime too, but also the key thing is preventing it, the preventative measures. And so I agree, before you solve crime, you should prevent crime. And the Citizen Security Program had the new one has a component that will focus on trying to vulnerable youth, training them, giving them other opportunities, etc. So a lot of it has been focused on crime prevention, working with communities to ensure that people had other opportunities. I don't like saying that people lose their jobs so they should go to crime, but the reality is that you've had over 6,000 people losing their jobs in the private sector alone. 6,000 people losing their job since this government came into office, and they came into office on a platform of creating jobs. And they don't have any prospect of bringing in any new investment in the near term, and the economy will tank, things would slide further, and so I'm very worried that the crime situation can even get worse in the future.
Do you think the justice system is also perhaps contributing to the perceived empowerment of the criminals? Because let's say someone is charged on armed robbery, but then placed on bail, so he gets off. There's no strict penalty there to prevent him from committing the act again.
Yeah.
Do you think the justice system has a role?
But that's why the entire project we had focused on the criminal justice system. You have to have criminal justice system reform. You have to have more consistent sentencing, faster trials, all of those things. You know, prisons have to be more secure, better conditions there, and a whole range. Everything contributes to this. But when you have an inept government focusing a lot on political opponents, almost the entire AG's office and half of the investigative capability of the police force has been focused on going after political opponents now, not on the criminals. So, you know, these forensic audits. So someone stole $1 million here, and I heard they shackled the guy. They said he stole $1 million Guyana dollars, but he was put in chain. Nandalal was telling me last night that they shackled him and took him to court to humiliate him. But you have hardcore criminals who don't go to court in shackles. If you denude the investigative capability of the police force and misdirect them to going after political opponents, then they can't be there to go after many of their criminals. So it's a whole era. And some criminals feel emboldened, as I said before. They said, you know, Granger is in office. This is our government. That's what they say. And policemen tend to be a bit, you know, reluctant to go after the people if they claim political connections, because many of them don't want to lose their jobs.
And one more thing. Every time anyone from the government talks about the crime situation now, they have a tendency to go back to 2002 and how the crime situation was then. So they would say, I don't know, what you're talking about the crime situation
exactly.
now in 2002.
The president has said that in his speech to the National Assembly. So he compares the situation now to the period in 2002 to 2006, 2007. So when I responded to his speech in the National Assembly, I read a section, just a tiny section, from Yussi Kwayana's book, The Morning After, to show who embraced the criminals. And PNC at that time embraced the criminals from Yussi Kwayana's book. It's not the PPP that said this. This is a person who's been opposed to the PPP, but he lived in Buxton. He saw how many of the leaders, current APNU leaders and some who are deceased now, how many of them visited the criminals, defended them, call them freedom fighters. The same people who massacre women and children and a whole range of people, they were claimed as political freedom, they were freedom fighters. So it was a totally different environment at that time. And I pointed out also in Parliament that two of the persons with them now, in fact three, two from the army, Collins and Gary Bess and Felix, were heading the army for most of that period and the police force. So and they knew, was it that we're being sabotaged in that period? But I don't want to go down that road now, because I'm now making excuses or anything of that sort. It was a bad period, but it was not purely criminal acts. We saw some of the hardcore criminals who would massacre people appear on television here in Guyana with an AK-47 and say, we are freedom fighters, fighting for the liberation of Guyana from the PPP. They were not ordinary criminals. So that's the big difference.